tonight, I am grateful to share this story with you all because every time I share it, I heal just a little bit. But I mostly want to share it because if I was sitting in your spot and the roles were reversed and some other woman was up here and she had gone through what I went through, I'd be like, how the hell did she survive, right? Because all of you sitting out here, or most of us feel this way, but a year and 5 days ago, if you had told me I'd have to live without Nate, I would have told you that was impossible. He was the most incredible man. He was my best friend. I'd grown up with him, and there was just no possible way I could have a reality where I could live without him in my life, without my kids' life. It just didn't work. But I stand here today, and I'm not lying. I am happier, more joyful, more grateful for my life than I have ever been. I am fired up about my life. And that's not in spite of Nate's death. That's because of his death. Because through his death, I found my life. I found out who I want to be, how I want to go through this world, who I want to be. And it's not living small. It's not being judgmental. It's not being cynical. It's not worrying about the little things. It's showing up all in right in this moment. And so I am so glad that you all are letting me do this because I'm sure when you were thinking about Ladies' Night Out, you're like, how can we make it more fun? Right? Oh, let's have Kelsey share her story from last year. That sounds light and entertaining. So don't worry. This story is not going to be all about death and loss, although most of it's all about death and loss. The truth is, this is a story about joy, and it's about living fearlessly, and it's about knowing that we're all here for a reason, and sometimes you got to go somewhere to get somewhere. And that's what I'm going to share tonight. My hope is when I'm done, maybe one or two things rings true in your heart, and you go, maybe I don't have to lose my husband to make that small adjustment, because that would be my preference. Dead husbands are a lot. It's a lot to deal with. So I'm going to start at the beginning of this story because it's important for people to understand the mystical and magical journey I've been on this past year. I met Nate my junior year at University of North Carolina. He was on the football team, and I was on the swim team. And the football team was coming over for a party at our house with the swim team girls. We were going to watch X-Files. It was a Sunday night. And they were coming over because the current quarterback at the time, who was ranked very high in the country and was a candidate for the Heisman Trophy and was super hot, Chris Keldorf. And he gets mad when I say was, but he was super hot. He was dating my roommate at the time, and so he came over and he brought a bunch of friends. And I remember a bunch of these guys walked in, and then this one guy walked in, and to say it was not love at first sight would be an understatement. He was wearing FUBU sweats. He was wearing a tight tank top. He was 305 pounds. He was 6'5", and he was a defensive lineman with a red goatee, and he had a dip-in. I didn't see a future with us, But I remember that night his intensity was high, and his passion and the way he talked about things was like big. And I saw something in him, nothing I was attracted to, but I saw something in him. And I was like, I don't know what this is. And so as the night went on, I really don't remember much about him. I just remember it ending with him like with an empty Coors Light box on his head dancing to Usher. And that was it. And then for the next 3 weeks, and one of my roommates is here, there she is, he would leave messages on our answer machine, and that's back then when you'd share an answer machine for the house. And they'd be like,
hey, this is Nate Hobgood Chittick. Kelsey, tell the guy you're with me now.
Click. And it went on like that, like day after day. And looking back, that was harassment, And at some point, though, I don't know if I remembered something in his eyes or his soul, but I was like, I'll go out with you. And so I remember he had to save up. He was super broke. He worked at a gas station during the summer, and he was a bouncer at night on Franklin Street. And so he took me to this really fancy restaurant. And I remember we sat outside for like 3 hours, and we talked about everything. We talked about what we wanted out of life. We talked about our faith. We talked about what we believed we were here for. What's this journey about? We talked about how many kids we wanted to have and what it would look like in a relationship where you wanted someone but you didn't need them. And it was just the deepest, coolest conversation I'd ever had. And at some point, he was like, let's dance. And it was only weird because there was no dance floor and there was no music at this place. But I remember we went out there and we swayed around a little bit, and then he excused himself to go to the bathroom. And when he went to the bathroom, there were some fraternity guys that came up, and they were like, hey, Kels, are you dating Nate? And I was like, well, dating's pushing it, but we're here, you know, and they were like, you look like Beauty and the Beast. And I thought it was mean, you know, and I was like, I don't know if I should tell him. I don't know him that well. Maybe he's going to get angry. He's a football player. But I've never been one to keep a secret. So when he came back from the bathroom, I was like, hey, listen, when you were in the bathroom, those guys over there, they said that when we were dancing, we looked like Beauty and the Beast. And he looked at me, and he looked at them, and he looked at me, and I was like, oh, no. And then he just pulled me in for this big hug, and he whispered in my ear, don't you ever let anybody call you Beast again. I was 19 and I fell in love with him that night. So fast forward 21 years of what was, in all accounts from my perspective, a phenomenal life. I had everything I wanted. And I had been very uptight about getting it. I'd spent my entire life controlling every step of my life. And every time I got somewhere, I'd be really grateful for it, but I'd not want to lose it. So I had a boy and a girl 2 years and 8 months apart. I moved to this beautiful town with this great community of people. We had a great home that we loved, a white picket fence. It had a broken gate. That should have been a sign. And I had a BMW from CarMax. Does it get any better? I don't think so. I remember in about 2015, I thought to myself, this is it. We've done it. Our kids were at that great age where they can take care of themselves and they can stay at home, but they're not into drugs or sex. And, you know, we had gone through some really tough financial times, which every NFL football player has to. And we were coming out of it. We were at the good point in our life. And I should have been happier than I've ever been. I almost enjoyed having sex with him at that point, too. Not all the way, but I was getting in that direction. I saw there was an up curve. We never got to me liking it, but I was so much closer than I had been for so long. Poor guy. I mean, how can you bless him, right? But I remember being like, why am I miserable? I was miserable. I had everything I wanted, but I just had this feeling inside, like, is this it? Is this all I'm here to do? Like, what is this? And I found myself starting to live smaller and smaller. I started being more cynical, more judgy. I just was angry. I was nervous all the time. And I wasn't that fun to live with, and I wasn't that fun to live with me. It wasn't fun to be inside me. And looking back, that feeling made me start on what would end up being a 2-year kind of spiritual reckoning. That if I know now, somehow that was my intuition telling me, get ready. Something's coming. And I say that not to scare you all, but I say it to remind women and mothers especially that our intuition and whatever that voice is inside you that says, listen up, is something you should pay attention to because it is actually our best gift that we all have. So when I started to get this feeling of just unsettled, it actually manifested into tons of anxiety and panic attacks that would happen at night. And I couldn't put my finger on it. I ended up going on kind of a journey of reading books and started meditating and praying and talking to people about what is this that's happening. And it wasn't really helping, but I was getting a bunch of tools. And it sort of all crescendoed at a trip in New York City. I was there for my best friend's birthday. And it was a month before Nate died. And it should have been a wonderful weekend, but that Saturday night I woke up in the city and I had what would be the biggest and last panic attack of my life. I remember I woke up and I couldn't swallow. I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing, and I was sweating. And I woke Nate up, and I said, you got to call 911. I'm dying. And I remember he sat up on his elbow, and he pulled off his sleep apnea mask. And which was normally the sign for let's have sex, but this was like, listen up. And he said, what's the problem now? What now? And I said, well, I can't go to Jamaica. And I need to back up. Through this spiritual journey, I read a book called The Code of the Extraordinary Mind, and it rocked my world. It rocked Nate's world. We gave it to our best friends, Tony and Toby. They ended up reading it, and through all these miracles, Tony connected to Vishen, and we were offered this opportunity for myself, Michelle, and I to go to this retreat in Jamaica for 4 days that was just about living your best life and showing up and the impossible being possible. And it was this awesome retreat. I really wanted to go, but my anxiety was super high, especially around travel. So that night I said, Nate, I can't go. I can't go to Jamaica. I can't leave. And I remember he looked at me and he's like, I can't do this anymore with you. I can't live with this woman that used to be so fun and so happy and so outgoing and lived big and had all these big dreams, and now you're living smaller and smaller and you're afraid of everything. He's like, you've got to show up for your life. You've got to live all in. This isn't fun. We can't keep this up. And I have a PR problem in this town because everyone thought I ran my marriage. I ran the little stuff, okay? When that man spoke, and it was rarely, I listened because his moral compass was through the roof. So when he said I was going to Jamaica, I was going. So on November 8th, I woke up in the morning and my alarm went off. It was an early flight through Miami to Montego Bay, and I went to call an Uber, and I heard Nate say, I'll take you. If you knew Nate, you should have known then something was wrong. Because for 15 years I've lived in this town, and that man has never once driven me to the airport for a flight that was before noon. Because he fundamentally did not believe in waking up early, and he thought an Uber was a brilliant thing to do to help support the local workers. So I was shocked, but I was like, okay, great. So we got in the car, and as we were driving to the airport, I was checking my phone, looking for my boarding pass, and he said, can you put down your phone? Can you put down your phone? Can we put down our phones? He said, I just want to hold your hand. So I put my phone down, and we held hands as we drove to the airport. And when we got to the terminal, he said to me, you're the most amazing woman I've ever met. I've loved you since the day I met you. I think you're the most phenomenal, funny, beautiful person, and I cannot wait for you to show up in your life. I cannot wait for you to have the courage to be who I know you are. So I want you to go to Jamaica, and I don't want you to worry about any of us because we're fine. So go and be all in. And then I want you to come back a different person. You're stronger than you think. And I remember I grabbed his chubby face and I said, God damn, I love doing life with you. I said, I love you so much. I've always loved you. And thank you for always being my number one fan. Thank you for reminding me this life isn't about comfort. It's about pushing the edge. I'm going to go, and I'm going to go to Jamaica, and I'm going to be all in. And I got out of the car, and that happened to be the last time I spoke to him. We headed to Jamaica, and it was almost like those realities had already passed. Whatever was going to happen, happened. And I spent the next 4 days having what I would say were the best days of my life. Because for the first time in my life, like most of us, I had lived worried about stuff I'd done or said, or worried about what was coming. But for some reason, when I landed in Jamaica, I just settled in. And I listened to every speaker talk about the impossible being possible, talking about that we all have dreams and we all have reasons why we're here, and we need courage, and we need to believe that we've got a purpose, and that living small or living comfortably or not serving is just not acceptable. And that living in the moment, just this moment, is the most important moment. And so I did that. I stayed up all night. I talked to brilliant people. I made friends that are doing phenomenal things in the world. I smoked Jamaican weed. I danced in the mud. I stayed up all night, and I just had joy. And I remember the last day, the Saturday morning, I woke up and I went to listen to a speaker, and this guy's name is Wim Hof, and he's insane. I mean, the way he spoke, he was on stage, he might have been drunk, I don't know. The guy was so entertaining because he didn't care what anyone thought. He just shared his story about doing things that most people would never dream of doing. And one of the things he would do is, through breath work and meditation, he would hold his breath and swim under glaciers. I think it's a stupid idea, but he wanted to, you know? Good for him. I was like, way to have a goal. But I remember at the end, he said he got on this path because when his children were young, he had 4 kids, his wife had died, and he had lost all sense of what mattered. And I remember thinking, that would suck. Raising kids alone would suck, right? But I remember being inspired by him. So that morning after he was done, I went out to the ocean, and I remember thinking, I'm going to hold my breath from some swimming area. I was going to hold my breath, and I got in the water, and I remember I started to swim, and it was so quiet. There was nobody else out there, and I literally could feel the divine around me. I could feel, for the first time in a long time, that everything's okay. And I kept swimming, and I felt like, oh, you're not alone. You're okay. And if you knew the timing of when Nate died and you knew the time of that swim, it would blow your mind. But I remember I came up out of the water, and I thought, I can't wait to show him what I've learned. And then I remember also saying, I'm going to move more during sex for him. But that was separate. That was a separate goal. But I don't want you to forget that, because I thought he would like that. I was like, I'm going to get on top. I'm going to do something. Because I had been frozen for a decade. So this is when the story takes a bit of a turn. Things happened pretty quickly after that. I got out of the water, I changed, I grabbed my phone, I got a text from his best friend, Chris, and it said, call us ASAP. And I called Michelle, and she said, listen, do not do what you do, okay? Everything is fine. Nate got up this morning, he took the kids to Sky Zone around 9, and then he fell. We don't know what's wrong, your mom's on the way to the hospital to meet him, but everything's good, enjoy the day. And I said what anybody would say when they get that call, who the hell takes their kids to Sky Zone when there's no birthday party? What in God's name? I mean, I couldn't comprehend it, but then I took a breath, and in that breath I said, he's dead. And Michelle said, I'm going to kill you. He's not dead. We're not doing this. I can't handle this right now. And then my friends Michelle and Toby walked up, and I said, he's dead. And Toby said something really nice, like, I'm gonna punch you in the effing face. He's not dead, he's the strongest man we know. This is ridiculous, we have a boat to catch. And I remember looking at them, and I remember thinking about all of them that they would have to catch up with my soul already knew. And so they said, what do you need from me? I said, I need you to help me pack up. I need you to help me get to my kids, get me on a flight back to the States. And so they packed me up. I was in jean shorts and a bikini, and we headed into a beat-up taxi on the way back to Montego Bay Airport, where we didn't know if there was any flights left to the U.S. We didn't know if there was any seats. And as we were driving, my phone rang, and it was my mom. Where's my mom? My strong, beautiful, courageous mother, who I don't thank her enough for what she did that day, but what that woman had to do and go through at that hospital, who was just going to check on her son-in-law, who she was annoyed with, who thought maybe he was dehydrated. What she had to shoulder and then pass on to me and to my children is more than most ever should. And so I picked up the phone, and my mom said, hi, sweetie, it's me. I'd like you to speak with the doctor. And I remember the doctor said, Mrs. Chittick, I'm so sorry. We worked on him for 50 minutes because we could feel his soul trying to come back, but it never did. And I said, is he dead? And the doctor said, he didn't make it. And I said, thank you, doctor, but I actually need to understand, is my husband dead? And he said, yes, Mrs. Chittick, Nate is dead. Take a breath. It's big, thank you. I remember a couple months before he died, I would walk on the Manhattan beach and I would just call to the universe, God, and I'd say, like, use me, serve me. And I would listen to these songs, and this one song I kept listening to had this line that said, we're all one phone call from our knees. And that was mine. And I got on a plane by a miracle, and there was miracles. Just so you know, there's miracles all around you all the time when crisis happens. If you see them, it'll blow your mind. But I got on the last flight, on the last plane back to the United States. They had pushed the plane back, and they brought it back, which is like highly illegal in the airport world. They're always like, no, you're 3 minutes late. They were like, bring her back. It happens. And when I got on the plane, I went into full shock. I started throwing up. I was dry heaving. My body temperature was dropping. I couldn't function. It's just like in the movies. Your body actually starts to shake, and you go insane. And not one single person spoke to me. And I wouldn't have either. Because the only thing worse than a newborn baby on a long flight is a middle-aged white woman who hasn't taken a Xanax. You're like, oh, no. So I was freaking out, and everyone was kind of ignoring me. And then about 20 minutes after we had taken off, I felt this hand on my shoulder, and I looked back, and it's this beautiful African-American woman. And I don't know if she was from Jamaica or the South, but I'll never forget. She put her hand on my forehead and on my shoulder, and she said, baby girl, I don't know what you are going through. And I do not know what waits you on the other side of this plane, but I want you to know right now you are not alone. God is with you, I am with you, and there are people all over praying for you. So I want you to slow your breathing down, baby girl, and I want you to think about how you're going to deal with whatever's waiting for you on the other side of this flight. And I slowed my breathing down, and in that moment I realized I couldn't bring Nate back, but I sure as hell could decide how I was going to deal with him leaving. So I spent the next 9 hours getting really clear on who I want to be today. I already saw her. This girl right here, I knew who she was going to become on that plane ride, because in that moment I decided my kids had already lost one parent, they weren't going to lose another. So I flew 9 hours home, and at midnight, my mother and my mother-in-law picked me up, and they took me to my kids. And when I walked in, I could tell in their eyes it would be rude of me to ask or say, your dad's dead, because they already knew. And what I didn't know then, but I know now through another bunch of miracles, is that my kids saw it all, and they watched it all. And no kid should have to see what they had to see. So I knew in that moment it was very important how we started this conversation. So I said, do you know your father is gone? And they said, yes, Mom. And then I told them three things I had thought about and prayed about and decided on that plane ride. I said this: first of all, your father would have never left you or me if we weren't okay. Do you understand? Yes, Mom. The second thing I said is, I'm enough. I have no idea how I'm going to do this without him. I have no clue. But I'm telling you right now, I am enough for both of you. I am enough. I said, so you guys go back to being 9 and 12, because I'm going to figure this out, and we're going to have a great life. Do you understand? Yes, Mom. And then I said to them this: don't for a second get it twisted. You are not victims. I said, you had the greatest father that I have ever known. He was the kindest, sweetest, most loving, patient, amazing human for 9 and 12 years. And he focused it all on you. Some people don't get that for a day. Don't ever forget you're the lucky ones. Do you understand me? Yes, Mom. And then I looked at those kids' faces and I said, what do you guys need from me? And I swear to God, Michelle was there at the same time. They said, if you're okay, we're okay. So like every mother in this room, guess what I became? Okay. And so starting that next day, I became okay. But don't for a second think it wasn't the worst year of my life. Don't for a second think those first 6 months, and I know there's other people in here who have been through this, is not hell. It is so hard and so bad and so painful that I knew I had to figure out how we were going to get through this. Because one thing I knew is if I didn't go through it, I was going to have to learn the lessons again. So the first thing I started to do is I said, come on, pain. I stopped drinking. I didn't take any pills. I didn't do anything. I just leaned in when the horror came. I hung on when the pain felt like you were going to drown. And then once it passed, I let go, took a breath, and waited for the next one. And the first 6 months, the waves come constantly. It feels like you're in the middle of the ocean. It feels like you have no idea what's happening, what end is up, and you just want to breathe. And so you just lean in, and you feel it, and you experience it, and then you let go. And over time, the waves slow down a bit. But what happens is you learn to not fear them, because what you realize is every time one of those big waves hits, it moves you a little closer to where you're heading, which is healing. I was suicidal. I thought about killing my kids. I thought about just ending it. There was no point. How are we going to do life without Nate? And I just stuck with that. I felt it all, and it was not fun. But I will tell you, if you can make it through that horrible pain, the joy on the other side as I stand up here today is like you're high on life because you made it through something huge. That's the first thing. The second thing I did was I reframed the story. Because we all have a choice on how we want to deal with what's happened to us in life. We can't choose what happens, but we sure can talk about how we want it to be shared. So I decided there was 2 ways. I could say I married the love of my life. I had 2 great kids. We had this phenomenal life. And then he died in front of them at 42 and left me a widow and my kids without a father. God, this is awful. How will we ever survive? That is one version. But since I'm the author of my story, I decided I wanted mine to end in joy. If I'm going to write it, let's make it a good one. So this is how I say it. I married the love of my life, and we had 2 amazing kids and a phenomenal life here. And he died way earlier than we ever expected, but not before changing so many people's lives, changing ours, and being just the greatest honor to be his wife and the mother of his kids. So although we miss him, we only miss him because we loved him so much, and to love someone so much is worth it. The next thing I did was I just swam in gratitude. So we'd wake up every morning and I would brainwash the kids like we were in a cult, and they hated it. But I'd be like, get up, tell me 20 things you're grateful for, and they would just list it, but they were broken, right? And they're like, we're happy because we have you. And I'd be like, oh, okay, say it again. I just created habits in their head. And I said, because if we keep focusing on what we lost, we will not make it. So we focused on what we had. And let me tell you something, anybody that's in this room right now has so much to be grateful for. Oh, there's so many things every morning you can be grateful for, even in the toughest times. So we just started to do that, and it became a habit. And before you know it, we were more grateful than we were before he died, because now we saw all the good things in our life. The other thing I did is I started to live in the present moment. This is going to be hard for you all, but I don't read school emails that much anymore. I don't care. You tell me to bring a flower on Tuesday and we're bringing food for teacher appreciation on Thursday. I'm like, I don't give up. I'm like, wake up. I'm like, it's Tuesday. I'm going to bring a flower. They're like, it's a wear red shirt day. I'm like, do I look like I care? I'm living in the present moment. It's a new thing that we all should do more of. Oh, please. What grief teaches you when you can only get through each moment is to not worry about anything else. And it became a habit for me, and now it's stuck. Because it's so fun to know in this moment, right here, I'm okay. You're okay. We're all okay right now. We might not be okay next week. We might not have been okay last week. But right now, in this breath, you're good. So I just stay in that pocket because I know it's not safe for me to go out of it, because I used to think I knew what was going to happen. And now that I don't, I just live here in gratitude. The last thing, well, 2 things. I stopped being afraid of everything. I was the most fear-based human on the planet before Nate died. And I thought if you could just control everything and you were grateful, then nothing bad would happen. And when that dream got shattered, I decided to step into my life and go all in, just like he would have. Living fearlessly as a mother and as a wife and at the age we're at is really hard because there's so much stuff we don't want to happen. But I promise you, it's worth it to just trust that whatever does happen, you will survive. The last thing I did is I transformed the way I look at death. Our culture does this very poorly, and we don't really talk about it a lot. We don't know what to say to people. We don't know what it looks like to see somebody in a morgue or to tell your kids about death because we don't have words or rituals. And people would always say to me, I'm sorry for your loss. And that drove me crazy because when I think of losing someone, I think of losing Jack in Target, like in a clothes rack. You know, I can find him. If you lose something, you can find it, it's somewhere. Well, it turns out Nate wasn't. He'd left the building for good. And I was like, he's not lost. So I had to change the way I thought about it. And through some amazing healing journeys, I realized what I had lost was his body. And his body was phenomenal. I missed his butt. I missed his arms. I missed his hugs. I missed the way he talked to me. But I had to let that go. But what I didn't have to let go was his soul. Because our souls are made of energy, and energy can't be created or destroyed. So that means he was somewhere. I just had to find him. And so what I did is I realized that if I can talk to God, I can talk to Nate. Because they're somewhere together in the divine. So I started to have conversations, and I started to have a relationship with him again. And I remember I told my kids, Dad's back. He said, put your iPads down. Sit up, look me in the eye, and we're going to have dinner together. And I blame everything on him now, and it's wonderful. They're like, who told you? I'm like, Dad said. They're like, God, we hate you. But that is a magical thing to do because I don't feel alone anymore. I miss him in a different way, but I don't feel like he's gone. And that has been the greatest gift for me. So I will end with this. From the bottom of my heart and my kids' heart, it's important for everybody in this room to hear this. And those of you who are especially need to hear it, please do. Thank you for everything this community has done for my family and my kids over the past 360 days. The number of texts and flowers and cards and prayers and hugs and rides and well wishes and casseroles. My God, the casseroles. I could use those now. I wasn't hungry then. What this town sent was a tsunami of love that just overwhelmed the grief. And what happens is when people show up for other people, you begin to hold the pain with them. And what each of you said to my family and I is, you're not alone. We loved him too. We're here for you. And what happened when you did that is that boulder of pain that was on my back that I didn't think I could move forward because of, you each came and you just put your hand on it and you said, we'll walk with you. And if every single person had that type of support, the world would be a different place. It really, really would. I will spend the rest of my life trying to repay all the things that were given to me over the past year. I used to pray that nothing bad would happen to me or my husband or my kids. Now I pray that whatever happens in my life, I have the wisdom, the strength, the power, the faith, and the people to not just survive it, but to thrive after it. Because this life is so worth living all in. Thank you all so much for letting me share the story. Thank you.
Come on, here we go.
Thank you.